Does the NFL draft have you wondering where these guys should go in your rookie startups? Let's talk about it.
Let's go.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Dynasty After Dark. I'm your host, Calvin Timms, and I'm excited because today I'm going to be recapping rounds 1 and 2 and 3, I guess, days 1 and 2 of the NFL draft. And there was a lot of interesting draft picks. Some people went to some interesting landing spots, some unexpected draft picks. And as always, the post-draft rankings never look quite like the pre-draft rankings for Dynasty. But I wanted to talk through a lot of these guys here with you today and how I would be ranking them, in a super flex startup or rookie draft right now. And, try not to overreact, try not to underreact. There's a lot of people who are going to, say, I've heard a lot of takes already that Rome Odunze is completely down, even though this is the expected landing spot for about 3 months now, him going to Chicago. So we're going to talk through it a little bit here today, and I'm going to try and, like I said, give you a more balanced take. That's why I kind of took my time a little bit. A lot of people rushed out their round 1 recaps and everything. I don't necessarily want to be first. I want to be right. So that's why I took a little bit more time to think through this more in-depthly and give you guys my thoughts. Now, that said, before we get into the video, if you can, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, like the video, leave a comment down below. You can talk about your favorite picks of days 1 and 2, or who, you're excited about, who you're kind of down on. Leave that comment down below. It just helps us out there. And you can follow me on Twitter at TDC_Calvin, the podcast at FF After Dark, and my co-host Dale is not in right now. He'll be back, I think, probably in about a week and a half. He's finishing up his yearly spring plays that he usually does, and he'll be back then. So we're excited to get him back, but I'm going to keep it rolling with a lot of content, especially now with all the rookies. And, if we have some interesting landing spots here on day 3, which is going on right now, I do have, I'm recording during round 3 here. So if there's some interesting landing spots, we'll record an extra video for that. But as of right now, nothing has really stood off the page yet. So, all right, let's recap a little bit. Day 1, unprecedented amount of quarterbacks go. 6 quarterbacks go in the top 12 picks. Caleb Williams goes to Chicago. Jaden Daniels goes to Washington. Drake May goes to New England. This is kind of chalk. This is what everybody was expecting for the draft. J.J. McCarthy goes to Minnesota. Bo Nix goes to Denver. Michael Penix Jr. goes to the big shocker here, Atlanta Falcons. And if you haven't followed just yet, that's my order of these guys in terms of my re-rankings of them. And we'll do a whole re-rankings episode when I do get Dale back in here, and we can get his thoughts on it as well. But, I do think that Caleb, it's a great landing spot. They added Rome Odunze, as I already kind of hinted to earlier in the podcast. Very talented offense. You can't complain about this group of guys at all. I think that Caleb Williams is going to be the first Chicago Bears 4,000 passer. And if you're watching on YouTube or Rumble, I'm donning my Chicago Bears hoodie because it's going to be a good time. If we can finally have a quarterback for once in my lifetime, that would be amazing. That doesn't, just flop completely. There's a lot of guys that had the hype, Jay Cutler, Mitch Trubisky, but they just couldn't live up to it. So maybe for once, Caleb Williams can be that guy, and I think he has a very good possibility and opportunity, so we'll see what he can do. Jaden Daniels pairs with Cliff Kingsbury over in Washington, and again, I like this for fantasy a lot. You saw what Cliff was able to do with Kyler Murray. I expect similar production from him over there, and should be fun at least to see how that kind of goes. Drake May goes to New England. I knew this was going to happen. If you watched my New England video, not the most excited. We did get a wide receiver in round 2, which we can talk about here soon, but I don't know, man. I don't love it. I do think that there's still a lot of holes. It's better than it was, but I think that Drake May is a long-term investment more than a short-term investment. If this team is not terrible next year. I don't expect them to be top 5 necessarily after this year. But if we're up top 10, maybe we go and get the top wide receiver in next year's class, and you can kind of pair with Drake May that way. But yeah, it's a little disappointing. Not my favorite landing spot here. JJ McCarthy going to Minnesota though. That is, I'm not the biggest JJ McCarthy fan, and I do have a little bit of a tier break between May and McCarthy, and that's mostly due to talent. I think that JJ McCarthy is not as good a quarterback as Drake May, but JJ McCarthy and Bo Nix both have an amazing opportunity here. And Bo Nix, you got to love the landing spot there in Denver. And then Michael Penix Jr. goes to Atlanta, sits behind Kirk Cousins. They're more than willing to let him sit for 4 to 5 years is what the GM said. It's not a great landing spot in my opinion. And the problem is, if you're drafting him now, unless there's a detrimental injury to Kirk Cousins, Michael Penix Jr. is never going to see the field. So what do you do with that for Superflex or non-Superflex leagues? Like, I just don't know what to do with that. So I've dropped him down quite a bit in my personal rankings. I'd be taking him at the back of the second round in a Superflex league. That might be crazy because he's a very good player. And if anything did happen to Kirk Cousins, I think Michael Penix Jr. would be very valuable for fantasy football in terms of throwing and what he can do from the pocket. But that's a big if. You don't love to invest high picks on guys that are handcuffs, essentially, especially in your rookie draft. So we'll talk about that, and we'll see how it kind of develops over the next couple months, but it's not great there. So real quick break, and then I'll be back with my running back. There's not too many guys here that we're going to talk about. All right, and if you haven't noticed, if you're watching on YouTube, I did turn the light off during that little break. Never record during the day, so I don't know how the lighting just is terrible with this window here behind me. And unfortunately, I can't turn down the light outside. So, yeah, hopefully you guys can see me a little bit better. I need one of those ring lights that just brightens up my face, that all the podcasters use. All right, running backs, post-draft, rounds 1, 2, and 3. No first-round running back. Trey Benson, I think he went early in the 3rd round. I think he was like the 1st or 2nd pick in the 3rd round, if I remember correctly. Jonathan Brooks goes in the 2nd. And the big one that's going to be hard for fantasy is Blake Corum going to the Rams. Jonathan Brooks to Carolina is interesting. To me, that says if you go back a year ago, a year and a half, when the Carolina Panthers signed Miles Sanders, they gave him a 4-year contract that was front-loaded, basically all of it in the first 2 years. So essentially after this season, they're going to be able to get out from Miles Sanders' contract. You look at Chuba Hubbard, and this is the final year of his rookie contract. I don't expect him to ever, sign a massive contract. He's a very good, dependable player, but he's not a superstar. And then Kyron Williams for the Rams. But yeah, Jonathan Brooks going to Carolina is a great landing spot. I don't think it's going to be great in year 1 this year, but with him coming off the ACL, I do think that this is good for him because he got solid draft investment, day 2 pick. The whole reason why I wasn't in on Jonathan Brooks was because of the ACL tear. I did not think that he would get drafted this high, but he did. The Panthers, questionable decision making, but they did go and get a guy pretty highly on day 2, which means they believe in the talent and they're going to let him make sure that he's fully healthy before they throw him out there on the field this upcoming year. So Jonathan Brooks, I like it. I don't love it in year 1, but I've already seen the rumors and the hype and the talk that he's going to be a late first-round pick. I don't think I'd be spending that personally. I'd be, high second, not a big difference, but I'd rather be taking Trey Benson, who went to Arizona. And I saw a lot of people down on Trey Benson because he went to Arizona, because he's behind James Conner, who is 28 years old. Like, he's never played a full season. James Conner is great, don't get me wrong, but Trey Benson fits in the James Conner mold, in my opinion. He's a traditional back, and he's got good hands. He can do everything. And he's insurance for after James Conner. They need to look to get younger at that position. This is a good landing spot. And he's my number one running back still post-draft. We'll see where Braylon Allen goes. He hasn't gotten drafted yet as of this recording. But by the time you're listening to this, you probably know his landing spot. So I don't know if I'd take him over Blake Corum necessarily. But yeah, it's tough because I think right now, Trey Benson and Jonathan Brooks are in a tier of their own. Blake Corum's in the next tier behind them. And Blake Corum going to the Rams, if you look at the post-draft press conference by Sean McVay, he said when he sees Blake Corum, he sees Kyron Williams, which they are very similar. They're both smaller. They're both very good runners, traditional runners. Not the best with their hands, but not terrible as well. What is this going to do to those two guys? Last year, I think Kyron Williams, when he was healthy, had like a 90% touch rate on the football. I don't think that's sustainable with these smaller guys. So is he going to pare it back to 75%? Is it going to be down to 60-40? What's that split going to be? Because they've invested a pretty high draft pick in Blake Corum, third-round pick. So I'm not entirely sure how they're going to use them. And if you listen to our pre-draft, running back rankings, Dale and I had Kyron Williams as our number 6 dynasty running back. And we both said at the same time, he is the scariest top 10 dynasty running back because of this exact situation. He was so good on the ground last year, so efficient. You take a big chunk of his workload away, which they are seeming like they're going to do this upcoming draft or this upcoming season. It's scary for fantasy. So, I don't know if he's going to be a top 10 guy yet again, but you can have that discussion down in the comments below, and I'd be happy to hear it. Wide receivers, it was a lot more interesting. I think that there's still the big 3 at the top: Marv, Neighbors, and Odunze. The funny thing is all of them went to the expected landing spots: Arizona for Marv, Giants for Neighbors, and Chicago for Odunze. And yet the hilarious thing is now that it's actually official, everyone wants to drop down Neighbors and Odunze because, they're not as good as what we thought when we knew where they were probably going to go anyway. So I have those kind of in 3 different tiers. Before I had Neighbors and Odunze in the same tier. I still think Odunze is a very, very good player. And the fact that he's coming into Chicago and he's paired with Caleb Williams, I think is a big difference. A lot of people are saying, oh, he's just JSN from last year, Jackson Smith-Njigba, who was drafted by Seattle behind DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. I don't see that same similarities because the biggest difference is when JSN was taken to Seattle, Lockett and Metcalf were already established, right? Both of them. With Geno, they've seen it. They did it all together anyway the year before. Shane Waldron, who is the OC of Seattle, now comes to Chicago. He was with Geno that year before. You're not just going to give a rookie full reign in the offense, first off. So it was already kind of a different situation. But now you get a rookie quarterback who has no synergy with anybody. Caleb Williams might like Rome Odunze more than DJ Moore. We have no idea at this point because the year before, again, Geno, we knew that he liked DK Metcalf. We knew that he liked Tyler Lockett, right? We don't know how he's going to feel with JSN kind of coming in there and how his role is going to develop. We don't know who Caleb Williams likes, and it's entirely possible Rome could be that guy. Shane Waldron's coming over fresh as well, and, he's going to try and make Caleb Williams just feel comfortable and feel good. We don't know, again, how that's going to break out between these guys. Obviously, Keenan Allen and DJ Moore are the veterans, and you expect them to get more of the opportunity early. But again, I think that they're going to try and incorporate Rome Odunze a lot more earlier into the offense. And then Rome Odunze was a much higher pick than JSN. JSN went at 21 with 4 wide receivers in a row right there. Rome Odunze was top 10. He was number 9 overall. And then the last thing too, Keenan Allen is also new to this offense as well. They traded a 4th-round pick for him. So he doesn't have any synergy or he's not owed anything by this coaching staff. He's older. He's just a veteran presence in this locker room. So there's a big difference, in my opinion, between Rome Odunze and JSN. I still like JSN, don't get me wrong, but Rome Odunze, a lot of people are saying, well, he might not be productive early. Well, if he only gets 800 yards this year and it's all in 9 games in the back half of the season, who cares? Like, that's really good for fantasy. So I think Rome Odunze is going to be a stud, and do not drop him just because he went to Chicago. Same with Neighbors going to the Giants. I don't love Daniel Jones and I don't love this offense, but there's good opportunity for him. So he's going to get a ton of volume. And if they move on from Daniel Jones to Drew Lock, I think Drew Lock can feed Malik Neighbors enough that he can be fantasy viable. So talent over situation, especially a wide receiver. Now, here's the biggest riser in my opinion. I like this guy a lot. I put out a video on him. You can go see my thoughts more in depthly if you go and look at that video. But Jermaine Burton goes to Cincinnati and the Bengals in round 3, and I am thrilled. The biggest thing with Jermaine Burton was the off the field stuff. He's kind of difficult to work with. He's gotten into some fights and, all that stuff. If there's one team in the NFL that does not care about any of that, the team that drafted Joe Mixon, the team that does not care, it is the Bengals. And they are going to give this guy a ton of opportunity, especially in year 1. They're going to start him probably in the slot with Boyd being gone from the team now. They have T. Higgins. They have Jamar Chase, obviously. And then they had a big hole in the slot position. They might still move T. Higgins. I think it's unlikely at this point in time, but it's still a possibility. If they move T. Higgins next year, after this season, Jermaine Burton could be the number 2 behind Jamar Chase. And you're like, oh, that's not great. You have Jamar Chase still. But look at what T. Higgins was able to do with Jamar on the field as well. Jermaine Burton, talent-wise, is the number 4 wide receiver in this draft class by far. Goes to a good landing spot where I think they're going to develop him, and he's going to have a lot of opportunity in just a short amount of time. So I like Jermaine Burton. I'm willing to take him as my number 4 guy over Brian Thomas. This might be a hot take, or people are calling me crazy for this, but I'm willing to do it. And, you can get him on a massive discount right now. I think he's probably going to be a mid-second round pick, and I would take him, probably 110 overall. So that kind of tells you how committed I am to Jermaine Burton over in Cincinnati. All right, number 5, I have Brian Thomas in Jacksonville. Again, they signed Gabe Davis. I think it was to a 3-year deal, if I remember right. But, Christian Kirk is starting to run out of his contract. And Brian Thomas is going to be a very interesting player. He has very similar skill set to Gabe Davis, so it's going to be interesting to watch how the Jaguars kind of incorporate both of those guys in the offense. Maybe Christian Kirk goes to full-time slot, and then you have Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas on the outside for 3 wide receiver sets. I do think that there's a little bit of a issue that in 2 wide receiver sets, if they ever do those, I think that Brian Thomas will probably be the one that they pull for a long period of time. Again, I like his talent, but I like Gabe Davis. I think Gabe Davis is underrated. I've talked about this many times, so that's my thoughts on Jacksonville. Still a good lane spot, still a good player, and again, talent over situation. It could be very clear that maybe I'm wrong on Gabe Davis, and in a year's time, Brian Thomas is the number 2 with Christian Kirk, and he can even push Christian Kirk as the air quote number 1 for the team, right? So, I like Brian Thomas still. I like this landing spot in Jacksonville. So they took him in the first round. He's a first round wide receiver, and I know it's crazy to have a round 3 wide receiver ahead of him, but that's just pure talent. Jermaine Burton is insanely good. So that's the kind of distinction I have between those guys right there. All right, if you're following along, I'm trying to drink my coffee, my first coffee of the day here, as I'm going through this. So, all right, last guy in this tier, this mini tier here, is going to be Xavier Worthy, who was drafted by the Kansas City Chiefs. They traded up in the first round to go and get them. I like it a lot. I think he's a very good player. I think that they're going to find a role, and if you have a guy that's going to find a way to incorporate Xavier Worthy into this offense, it's going to be Andy Mahomes, Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. I think that Xavier Worthy has a lot of opportunity. I do think that he's going to be a little bit overdrafted. I think that he's going to be the wide receiver 4 consensus, going at probably 109. And I don't know if I love that so much, but yeah, it is what it is. I do think it's a great landing spot, though, and I think he's going to have a lot of fantasy relevance as well. Small tier break here. My number 7 guy, and I'm kind of split between him and Worthy here, is going to be Roman Wilson with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And again, he's a day 3 pick versus Keon Coleman, who was the 33rd overall pick. He's my number 8 guy here. But Roman Wilson, I love it for Russell Wilson. I don't know if I love it so much, and this is where I'm struggling with Roman Wilson. Roman Wilson is Tyler Lockett for this offense, and I know that's easy to say. He is Jerry Jeudy, but he's the ultimate safety valve. When I watch this guy, he is just the guy who's going to get it done. He is the Deontay Johnson with better hands, in my opinion. And, they send off Deontay Johnson. They replace him with Roman Wilson. It's him and George Pickens in this offense. And there's a very clear opportunity here for Roman Wilson, especially with guys like Russell Wilson, who likes to get it out quickly and likes the guys that can be reliable, right? That's where Roman Wilson is very good. And that's where, Jerry Jeudy, say what you want about him, but he wasn't very reliable in Denver. He didn't really catch a lot of the balls. He had a lot of struggles with dropping the ball, right? Maybe he can fix that, maybe not. But yeah, Roman Wilson, I think he has an amazing opportunity. When Justin Fields takes over, I don't know how I feel about it because Fields isn't the most, accurate guy. And again, he's taken steps in the passing game, but is he going to be the long-term solution for Pittsburgh? We don't know. But yeah, I don't know if I love Roman Wilson with Fields necessarily. I think in that case, I like Pickens a little bit more. But with Russell Wilson, I think Roman Wilson has a lot of Wilson to Wilson. Here we go. We can get that going again. But I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I like him a little bit more than Keon Coleman going to Buffalo. But, the upside there is definitely with Coleman. Coleman has the traits to be a number 1 alpha dog, DK Metcalf type of wide receiver. But he's sloppy. He's not the most technically sound guy. And I've kind of been in and out on him. He's been my wide receiver 10 for most of the offseason. And now he jumps up to 8. It's a good landing spot. I love the landing spot and the opportunity that he's going to have, but he is a little bit, shaky. And I don't know how that's going to affect him for fantasy football, but the opportunity is definitely there. So you cannot complain about Keon Coleman's landing spot whatsoever. And if people want to take him ahead of Brian Thomas, ahead of Xavier Worthy, I get it. I'm a little bit more skittish, I guess, but I do understand it. So that's my thoughts on Keon Coleman there. All right, now the next tier guys, this guy is going to be very popular. Ladd McConkey, I've seen everybody saying how he's going to be the number 4. There's a big battle right now, which is great for fantasy, the later picks in the first round. Ladd McConkey has been talked about as the number 4 wide receiver in this class. Post-draft, he's got a lot of opportunity. Everyone's saying that there's no competition. Guys, you guys got to stop saying that. Quentin Johnston, you might not like him, but the team is going to try and make him work. And say what you want about him, but there is competition. But at the same time, Ladd McConkey does come into an amazing situation. Palmer, QJ, and Ladd McConkey are going to be the top 3 wide receivers for this team. Not a, jam-packed, stellar group of guys on paper. So Ladd McConkey has a lot of opportunity, and I think that he's someone that is going to be very good. Again, I don't know how much volume he's really going to get in this offense. That's the only reason why I'm a little bit lower on him than consensus. I could see the argument, though, for taking him over Roman Wilson just because of the quarterback situation, but Pittsburgh, man, they don't miss. When it comes to wide receiver, they do not miss. So that's the only fear that I have for Roman Wilson. I like Roman Wilson a lot. He was my wide receiver number 7 post-combine. He was my number 5 pre-combine. And I think that he's a very good player, and Pittsburgh did not miss, in my opinion. So Ladd McConkey, you can make the argument to take him over him, but I would still probably lean with Roman. But yeah, Ladd McConkey, great landing spot in LA paired with Justin Herbert. You'll love to see it. Definitely love to see it. And it's got to be because he played for Georgia, with Harbaugh coming straight from college. There's you see him taking a lot of these big name, these playoff guys, national playoff. What am I trying to? I don't even know what I'm trying to say, but with Georgia being in the limelight for the last couple of years, I think that definitely lent towards Ladd McConkey getting more of an opportunity than some of the other guys. Number 10 here is going to be Jalen Polk with New England. They took him in the second round. I don't love it. I don't hate it. I don't love it. The biggest thing for Jalen Polk for me is that he's not a number one, in my opinion. And when you look at New England, we need a number one. We desperately need a number one. Now, again, you go back to what I was talking about with Drake May. If in a year's time they go and invest in next year's draft class on a top 10 pick on a wide receiver, okay, Jalen Polk could have some. Now you're cooking with gas. Again, I like Drake May. I think that he can definitely feed a lot of guys from a fantasy football perspective. But Jalen Polk, man, it's going to be tough in year one. I think it's going to be a little bit of a struggle, but I do love the talent. He's a very talented slot type of wide receiver, and he was number 9 for me before. Now he's number 10, so he's not a ton of movement for him. Good landing spot, second round pick. They got their guy there. I wish they would have maybe taken Adonai Mitchell, who went to Indianapolis, but it's better than nothing. At least they took a quarterback in round 1 and number 1 air quote wide receiver in round 2 that these two can kind of develop together. So you like to see that, but again, I think we do need a Brandon Ayuk, guys. Go get a Brandon Ayuk or T. Higgins. Do it, please do it. All right, then the last guy in this tier is going to be Adonai Mitchell, who went to the Indianapolis Colts. I don't love this landing spot. It's great for the football team. It's great for Indianapolis. You got a good player, but you just paid Michael Pittman Jr. You drafted Josh Downs last year. Are you really going to see a ton of volume for him with Anthony Richardson? I don't know. And I don't think that the volume will ever be there. I think Michael Pittman is the number one guy. He's your Michael Thomas of this offense. He's going to be the guy that catches 8 for 80 every single week or 8 for 100 every single week. Josh Downs, Adonai Mitchell fighting for the number 2 job. I like Adonai Mitchell a little bit more, I guess, but it does definitely hurt his fantasy relevance a little bit more. And especially when you pair that with the quarterback who is going to be more of a rushing threat than some of the other guys out there. So the passing volume is going to be a little bit lower as well. So don't love the landing spot. Good for the actual NFL, bad for fantasy football. So just want to put that out there. I love it for the Colts. I hate it for fantasy. So Adonai Mitchell falling down a little bit in the rankings here. Number 12 is going to be Troy Franklin, who, I said I'm recording during the actual day 3. The 4th round just started about 15 minutes ago. And Troy Franklin was the number 2 pick in the 4th round to the Denver Broncos. He's going to be my number 12 here. I didn't love Troy Franklin before. The fact that he falls out of the top 3 rounds, I think Denver had a late 3rd round pick that they could have taken him with, and they chose to go with another position. They get their guy, and everyone's going to make comparisons. Oh, he's Amon-Ra St. Brown. Amon-Ra was not a small dude like Troy Franklin. Again, the biggest problem with Troy Franklin, he's tiny, he doesn't play physical, and I don't think he's the cleanest route runner. So I don't love it. You get to pair him with Bo Nix, who was his college quarterback, so there's that benefit, but I'm still putting him in my top 12, but barely. So he has fallen a little bit for me. There's going to be people that are going to argue you still need to take him as the number 5, number 6 wide receiver. Take it your own risk, guys. I don't see it working that well for fantasy football. Same with the next guy here, and this is kind of this whole tier here of guys that are fantasy darlings that or at least Twitter darlings that everyone likes to hype up, but I'm skeptical if it's going to work for actual fantasy football. Xavier Legette was drafted in the 1st round. The Panthers traded up 1 pick. They are so bad. Like David Tepper, oh my gosh, this guy is the worst owner of an NFL franchise I think I've ever seen in my life, because he trades up 1 pick for Xavier Legette Why? I have no idea, because you could have taken Keon Coleman, who's the same player as Xavier Legette, basically, with more production at an earlier age. So Keon Coleman was probably the better player than Xavier Legette. Legette had an amazing year this last year, though. So, granted, fifth-year breakout, Xavier Legette. But you traded up one pick for the fifth-year option on an older wide receiver. Like, it's just so stupid. It's so dumb. Just sit where you're at and keep the draft picks, man. What are you doing? What are you doing? But he could be the number one for this team. Deontay Johnson's over here now, so you like to see that. You like to clown on the Carolina Panthers, but I do like everything that they've done this offseason. They brought in Deontay Johnson. They drafted Jonathan Brooks to replace those two guys that I talked about earlier. They bring in Xavier Legette. They have Jonathan Mingo from last year. So in reality, man, it's not a bad situation at all. So you like to see what they're doing. I do think that they needed to invest a little bit more on the offensive line to keep Bryce Young upright and not dead. But other than that, they've done a pretty good job, in my opinion, this offseason. And speaking of that as well, they did just take Jatavion Sanders in the 4th round as well. I just noticed that. So they're building around him. They are definitely giving Bryce Young weapons, but is it going to be enough? I don't know. Ricky Pearsall was a first-round pick by the Niners. This one is interesting to me. This one says that they're preparing to lose one of their two guys, Debo or Ayuk. Again, no trades have happened as of the time of recording, but I'm just checking, making sure. Yeah, nothing, no trades yet. You go back to my Ayuk video, I don't think that they're going to move him this year. This is more future-proofing, but people love Ricky Pearsall. I don't know, man. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just not seeing it, but I don't love it for fantasy football. I would take all the guys I've mentioned so far just in terms of raw upside over Pearsall, but Kyle Shanahan can make guys fantasy relevant who we don't really care about. So there is that piece of it as well. And then the last guy we'll talk about here today is Malachi Corley, who went to the Jets in round 3. Malachi Corley is going to be more of a Debo Samuel type of player. He's kind of a running back-ish type of wide receiver. Good weapon. The Jets don't. He's going to be the number 3 behind Mike Williams and Garrett Wilson. So not terrible, but they're just. I don't know. I don't care that much for fantasy football. I guess I just don't see the relevance for fantasy. He's going to be at best a wide receiver like 30. So I just don't love it as much. So Malachi Corley goes to the Jets. A couple other guys. Jalen McMillan goes to Tampa Bay. This one's a little interesting in round 3. And then Luke McCaffrey goes to Washington in round 3 as well. So those are the only guys that have gone so far. Tight end. Man, I really want to put a hot take out there. Ben Sinnott went to Washington in round number 2. Ben Sinnott, I want to put him as my number 1 tight end. And I understand how crazy this sounds. Brock Bowers is generational talent-wise. But he goes to the Raiders. And again, talent over opportunity. But I just don't know what the Raiders are doing, because they have Michael Mayer that they drafted a year ago, who was the consensus number one tight end in that draft class. Now you take Brock Bowers with a top 12 pick. How is this offense going to work, man? Is it going to be like old school Patriots, 2 tight end sets? You know, you got Devontae Adams and what's his face? I'm blanking on the name of the other wide receiver there. I can see him from the Patriots, but I just I don't know how this offense is going to function. And you got Gardner Minshew coming in at quarterback. They still need a quarterback. How is the volume of this team going to really shake out? I don't know. So on the other side, though, you got the Senator Ben Sinnott going to Washington with Jahan Dotson and now Luke McCaffrey and Terry McLaurin. This was a massive need for Washington. They've been needing a tight end for years now. You also pair what Cliff Kingsbury did back in Arizona with the tight end position. I think there's a lot of opportunity for Ben Sinnott. And honestly, at draft costs, I think I'd rather have Ben as my number one. Obviously, I still have Brock Bowers as my number one guy. He talent-wise, again, talent over situation, but it's a good situation, and he's a very talented guy. So I like Ben Sinnott a lot, and I love this landing spot. So at cost, I would probably be taking Ben Sinnott over Brock Bowers, but to each their own. To each their own. So that said, that is all of the guys that went in rounds 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to give you an overall Superflex ranking here. And if you guys want to know my one quarterback, I haven't put that together yet because every league I'm in is Superflex, so I'm obviously focusing on that more. But I can give you guys my thoughts on that as well. In terms of quarterbacks, obviously Caleb Williams is still going to be up there. I wouldn't be in a one quarterback. I'm not taking J.J. McCarthy, Drake May, Bo Nix, any of these guys in the top 2-3 rounds. So maybe round 3 for a couple of them. But Jaden Daniels, I would be interested in the probably upper second in a Superflex or a one quarterback just because of the rushing upside. I do think that there's going to be a lot of upside there. So Superflex rankings, Caleb Williams, number 1, Marv, number 2, Jaden Daniels, number 3. And people I've seen still have Neighbors over Jaden Daniels. He's a good player, but Jaden Daniels, man, he's going to have a lot of fantasy production for a very long time. So I like that a lot more than Neighbors. And Neighbors needs a new quarterback. And again, talent over situation and opportunity, but Neighbors is going to be a little bit more of a longer road for him to be an elite superstar at fantasy, where I can see Jaden Daniels having the rushing upside here in the next couple of years to make him a top, kind of a staple in the top 10 for fantasy football. So that's the difference there in those two guys. I think Neighbors is still a good player, don't get me wrong, but if you need a wide receiver more than a quarterback, feel free to take Neighbors there over Jaden Daniels, but I would be taking, team unknown, unspecific teams here, Jaden Daniels over Malik Neighbors. Drake May still my number 5. I would take him over Rome. I take him over McCarthy. Again, long term, I think the talent is going to be too good for Drake May. He will be a very good fantasy player for the future. Rome Odunze is number 6. JJ McCarthy, number 7. I have Jermaine Burton at my number 8. Again, kind of explain that, why I would be taking him over some of these other guys. Brian Thomas, number 9. Bo Nix at 10, Trey Benson at 11, Brock Bowers at 12. And that's the entire first round there. So, Brock Bowers, big drop. Used to have him as a top 7 pick in Dynasty, but I don't love the opportunity. And he's a tight end again, which isn't great for fantasy production. And there's a lot of tight ends that are relevant for fantasy football right now. So I'm not taking Brock Bowers that high. I think people still will take him around 7, 8 in a lot of rookie drafts, but I'm dropping him down. I'm happy to take some of these other guys. And I'll give you what I think the consensus will be here in just a minute so you can kind of compare my list versus that. But Trey Benson, again, is my number 1 running back. I like it a little bit more. I think if both Brooks and Benson really don't do much this year and next year you're giving them both these backfields, I like Arizona more than I like Carolina. So that's the biggest thing there. All right. Round 2, Xavier Worthy, Jonathan Brooks, and then Roman Wilson. That's the top 3 in this round. Keon Coleman right after that. Lad McConkey, Jalen Polk, A.D. Mitchell, Michael Penix Jr., Blake Corum at 21, Troy Franklin at 22, Xavier Legette at 23, and then rounding out the second round is Ricky Pearsall at 24. Again, the only guys that I could see kind of pushing their way up here is if I get it, it's round 4, guys. You have to take draft capital into it. But if Braylon Allen or Jalen Wright get round 4 draft capital, I'd probably be taking them over. A.D. Mitchell is probably the breaking point. Depending on situation. So there could be one final change for this, depending on how round 4 goes. If Jalen Wright and Braylon Allen both get round 5 draft capital, it's not great. So I'd be kind of lowering that a little bit. But Braylon Allen, man, he's so young. He is so freaking young. He's not even going to be 21 until after his rookie year. So, yeah, I like Braylon Allen a lot. I hope he gets round 4 draft capital. That means that there's a decent investment. With the devaluing of the position, though, that everyone's talked about, it should be expected that these guys go a little bit later. So I'm just checking really quickly. I don't see any running backs off the board here in round 4, so they have not been drafted yet. So stay tuned. We'll talk about those guys. But yeah, Caleb Williams, Marv, Jaden Daniels, Neighbors, May, Adunze, McCarthy, Burton, Ryan Thomas, Bo Nix, Benson, Bowers is my round 1. Round 2 is going to be Roman Wilson, Xavier Worthy, Jonathan Brooks, Roman Wilson, Keon Coleman, Lad McConkey, Jalen Polk, Adonai Mitchell, Michael Penix Jr., Blake Corum, Roy Franklin, Xavier Legette, Ricky Pearsall. Now, I said I would give you guys consensus. This is my expected consensus here in the next couple of days. This is how I think it's going to shake out for fantasy football. And I don't know for a fact, but this is how I expect it to break down here. Caleb Williams at 1, Marv at 2, Daniels at 3, Neighbors at 4, I think JJ McCarthy at 5, Rome Odunze at 6, Drake May at 7, Xavier Worthy at 8, Brian Thomas at 9, Bowers at 10, Jonathan Brooks at 11, Keon Coleman at 12, Benson at 13, Lad McConkey at 14, Bo Nix at 15, Troy Franklin at 16. Again, people are going to overvalue him, even though he was dropped down the board by everybody. Xavier Legette at 17, Jalen Polk at 18, A.D. Mitchell at 19, Blake Corum at 20, Roman Wilson at 21, Jermaine Burton at 22, Penix at 23, and Ricky Pearsall at 24. Now, this doesn't mean it's going to be accurate, but this is just based on Twitter and the reactions that I'm gauging from a lot of players. This is what I expect the first 2 rounds to kind of settle out as from a consensus rating. So you can let me know where you think it's going to be different, but these are my rankings. And again, like I said, I didn't want to be first. I wanted to be right. So we'll see how it all shakes out here in the next couple of weeks, next couple of months. If you've got your rookie draft starting soon, which most of them do, good luck. Hopefully you guys can get some good players. But it was definitely a great round 1, day 2, day 1, especially for the later rookie picks. The 1-9 to basically the 2-5. Man, it's so deep this year. I love it. I definitely love it. So if you can be switching your 2025s for 2024 first, I would be doing it personally, but it is what it is. So let me know your thoughts. Again, you can follow me over on Twitter at TDC_Calvin, at FF After Dark. Podcast is on YouTube, Spotify, Google, Apple, everywhere that podcasts are found. So let me know your thoughts, and please subscribe, like, comment, all that fun stuff. Going to be a lot more content. We're going to be pumping it out nonstop. So thank you guys for joining me here today. And until next time, have a good night.
And we all got dreams, we all want things, but what you gonna do for it? How you gonna move for it? What you gonna be?